Hello, everyone. I'm Master of the Lemons, aka Lemmy,
And I'm here, the Japanese train, aka Matt.
and welcome back to Character Gallery. And I think it's going to be a hell of a good conversation because we are talking about one of our all time favorite characters, Molly.
Molly is literally in like my top three. Like, people who know me know that my favorite character is Murdoch, and Molly is very close to the top for me.
She has a character archetype that no other character has, which is that she's a shy character and kind of a sad character and kind of an introspective
Which
character.
makes me resent the comparisons that people have made between her and Rebecca, because personality
Yeah,
wise they're so different. Like,
and it's like, obviously people are free to, characterize her however they please.
mm,
And of course we'll both defend that to the grave. However, the way we see Molly, we definitely see her as, we want to lean into Molly's special because I think that, the shyness and kind of the insecurity that she exhibits in that episode are just phenomenal. I think they're really interesting to work with. And the thing about Rebecca is she's yellow, yes. Um, Not much else in common. um,
she has a much younger vibe, a much more confident vibe. Like,
yeah,
her,
she
the
does.
confidence alone sets them apart. Molly, that is her greatest weakness, is a lack
Yeah,
of confidence.
she doesn't believe in herself, which is why I think it's absolutely perfect that they pair her with Thomas in this story, the engine who believes in himself more than any other engine on the planet.
Right.
Thomas has just this extreme, unbridled confidence in life. He just believes he can do anything, and sometimes he's right. And so when he encounters Molly, this engine who is just totally, down on herself and feels terrible because I think it's very interesting, like what kind of kicks off her sadness for the day, which makes it sound like she has a daily sadness, which I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, her daily, her Molly's melancholy.
Yes, Molly's morning melancholy. um,
For short.
yes, but I like, it's interesting that she says, Emily laughed at me for pulling empty coal trucks or something like that, right? And it's like, it's really like, I can really see Emily doing that, but it's also it, it's I do wonder how much of that is like Molly being really sensitive to it and how much of it is Emily actually
Well,
being really mean.
and that's the thing, because like if it was any other engine, they'd be like, well, yeah, everyone pulls empties. I'm just doing busy work, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But like if it had been like, I don't know, if Emily had laughed at Percy for pulling coal trucks, if she was just like, I can't believe it, you're pulling that. Oh, you really are the little tank engine I thought you were. Just as like a teasing thing, right? Percy would be like, yeah, well, I bet you can't even do it. Here, try. Oh, well, I can do it. Hold on. Just give me a second. And she uncouples and tries to prove herself, right? Like, Percy would be
Hmm.
able to kind of, like, get his own back very quickly, and the two would be on equal playing ground, right? Whereas, like,
Whereas with Molly, I don't think that day she was particularly insecure about whether or not her trucks were full or empty. But when
yeah,
Emily teased her about it, her mindset is like, "Oh God, pulling empty trucks must be like the worst thing in the world.
exactly.
I'm
She is
terrible."
she is definitely like the kid in school who has to have like the right shoes, or else she's just gonna feel terrible about herself and feel like the outcast. And like, I could totally see that being the case. It almost makes me wonder if, when she comes to the island, because this is something I've wondered forever, and I know you have too, Matt, is
Hmm.
why is she yellow? She's
She's
so,
like the brightest character in the whole series.
I know, and she's so shy. You would think she'd choose black or something because she just does not want to stick out. And yet she is like the brightest color ever. I have like, I mean, we've got a few theories for this. I think like it's possible that, when she comes to the railway, the Fat Controller sizes up very quickly that she is a very shy character. So in his kind of like encouraging kind of, but throw your kid in the water kind of fatherhood mentality, he's just kind of like, all right, well, we're painting you yellow. What? No, hold on, sir. I don't really want to be painted yellow. I might stick out too much. That's exactly why you've got to be yellow.
Even exacerbated by the fact that there's not a single other yellow engine other than like Bill and Ben, who don't even belong to the Fat Controller.
Exactly. Like he chooses like the brightest color he can think of that will make her stick out. He's like, that will break you of this shyness. We're like, and it's interesting because that probably shows whichever Fat Controller we're on at this point when Molly arrives, say the second or the third. It shows the difference from the first one, because the first one was like, because I think Henry has a bit of this same shyness, and instead of encouraging him to be different, the first Fat Controller was like, I'm so annoyed by his social awkwardness. I'm just going to paint him blue like all the other engines. Hopefully he'll blend in and pull the trains on time. Whereas like with Molly, the Fat Controller does the opposite. He's like, she needs to be encouraged to go out of her comfort zone. So we're painting her yellow. I don't care if we don't have the yellow paint yet. Order it, Like,
what's interesting is that while she, I think to me, appears very uncomfortable in her own paint scheme, I think she would also maintain it, like, almost, like, ritualistically, almost, like,
I think
pathologically.
So. It's like, somebody like Gordon, maintains, he keeps himself clean because, he thinks he deserves it and because, it looks good. But if he ever has to not be clean, I think, like say throughout, I don't know, the World Wars, Gordon would, I'm sure he'd get dirty a lot and have no problem with it because no one expects him to be clean. But the thing is, like, Molly isn't focused on, like, her reasoning is very different from Gordon or even James, where she is entirely focused on how others look at her. Like, when she looks at herself in the mirror, this is crushing to say, but I honestly think if she looks at herself in the mirror, she just hates what she sees no matter what she does.
I think that she would, like, if she had, like, a speck of dirt on her, she would spend, like, an hour and a half just trying to get that washed off.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, she's just so, hyper-focused on how others see her, and she's just got a lot of, like, self-worth issues. She just really, if there's one engine on the island that I could see really having a lot of crushing self-worth issues, I think that it's definitely Molly. Because, I mean, her entire episode is kicked off by a single comment that Emily made in passing, which, granted, Emily should not have done. That was a mean thing to say. Like, why would you laugh at somebody for pulling coal trucks? But she did, right? And that happens all the time on Sodor. We see it constantly. And yet, most engines brush it off. It's not a huge deal. It's annoying.
Well, and get this. It takes her the entire day and Thomas's support to get the task done. Like, she's just delivering empties to the coaling plant, and it seems that she's been sitting there for a while by the time Thomas arrives. And then Thomas goes off and comes back. She's still there. Like, has her fire gone out because of Emily's comments? Like,
honestly, that's I could see that, where it's just she won't start up.
I think it's just paralyzed her.
Can you this makes me think of what Molly's crew is like. Like, I imagine that Molly's crew is just the most coddling, supportive set of people possible. They're just kind of like, oh, come on, Molly, get up to steam. It's all right, Molly. You can do it, Molly. They're very, very optimistic people. And then Molly's just all miserable, and she's just looking at the ground, and she's just like, oh, if Emily doesn't like me, no one else here will either. And I mean, Emily says that she's the queen of this railway, so she's going to influence everybody else, and it just... what's the point? She's just so miserable, right? And her crew is just like, oh, Molly, it's not that bad. Come on. And they're both just out in front, kind of like Gordon on the hill, where his driver's like, you're not trying. Except it's like...
yeah, just put Gordon's crew in this situation. You're not trying, Molly. You suck.
Gordon's crew cannot get anywhere near Molly at any point. But yeah, her crew's just standing in front of her, patting her buffer, just like, you can do it, Molly. It's fine. Your new coat is beautiful, and you're a wonderful engine. But, she's just not buying it. She's just like...
This is compounded by the fact that she's new to the railway,
Yeah.
too. So she could very easily believe that... Like, Emily could make her believe that she's the top dog of the railway.
Exactly, yeah. And then Thomas comes along. I'd love to see some extended dialogue of the scene where they meet, where Molly says, Emily laughed at me and said pulling coal trucks is ridiculous and undignified, and she should know. I mean, she's the queen of the railway.
What's so funny?
I'm sorry, you believe Emily when she says stuff like that? God, you haven't been here long, have you?
Well, if she's not the queen, then who is?
Me? I'm the king of Sodor, baby. Pretty much. He goes and tells another parallel lie that he believes. But he's like, and I think that you're great. I mean, pulling empties, there's no indignity in that. There's no disrespect. I mean, Percy does it all the time. I mean, I don't really. I pull Annie and Clarabelle, but I respect it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it's a fine job to do. Really? And she kind of starts to wipe the tears away. And Thomas is like, oh, yeah, totally. But those other guys aren't really going to respect it. Oh, Tops will fix this. And, like that sort of thing, right?
I know. Let's solve the problem by covering it up.
Yeah.
Just bury your problems deep down, Molly. That's what I always do.
It's true though, isn't it? Like that's what he does. Like that's his solution to the problem. Is the other engines are laughing at Molly because the trucks are empty. So Thomas just covers up the empty trucks. It's like, all right, that's the way to fix this. Which, granted, it's a very hands-on solution. Molly has been sitting here for 3 hours crying. At least Thomas has a way to help her move forward. But ideally, it would be someone like Edward that comes into the yard.
And then Thomas is like, oh, I know. We'll tell the whole island that you're pulling the most special train of all.
I think there's a point where... So Thomas is like very much looking out for Molly's mental health here. And he cares, I gotta say, it's wonderful to see Thomas just come along and prove why he's such a great friend. Because there's a lot of stories that make him look like a jerk, where he kind of blows off Percy and he's not really a nice guy. And the thing is, this is really exactly why he has so many friends. Is because when he meets somebody, he immediately does everything in his power to help them. But at the same time, the reason that Thomas is such an interesting character is because he's got a bit of vanity. And the thing is, I think that once he starts helping Molly, this whole kind of idea of making a special train that, everybody's going to see and there's going to be this big event, he kind of starts making it his own thing. And so
he has no plan. He's just winging it.
He's literally just flying along the main line, finding every engine he meets, and he's just like, hey, there's a special train. It's pulled by this new engine called Molly. You should see it. It's amazing. And then Emily's like, well, what is the special train exactly, Thomas? And Thomas is like, oh, I'm not telling you, but it's great. Believe me. And then he leaves, right?
And he has no idea.
Yeah, it's like he's just gonna wing it later. He's like, oh, I'll figure it out. And it's just like so careless. Like he has no plan.
That's a job for future Thomas.
God damn it. Yeah. From 3 hours in the future. Very close, Thomas. Kind of down to the wire. But, so like, and I imagine, then when he encounters Gordon and Gordon's like, there's no way it's as important as the Express. Thomas is immediately just like, no, it absolutely is as good as the Express. In fact, it's better. And I imagine in Thomas's head, he's then immediately like, God damn it, why did I just say that? But it's too late.
Then I'll inspect myself. Tonight at Abbey Station.
So Gordon sets the location for it. He just decides. It's like, that's where it will be. Reschedule it. I don't care. I'll be there waiting. So now Thomas has worked up the entire island and gotten them all excited about the prospect of this train. And the thing is, I feel like if you were really looking out for Molly, he would have just drawn the line at covering up the trucks. But he got carried away, and he kind of liked the idea of being the center of attention a little bit himself, because he's kind of like Molly's manager in this, honestly. Molly is the talent, and he's having her lip sync on stage, and and she's like,
and then the radio breaks.
Yeah, exactly. Molly before the show, before she goes out there, would be like, are you sure this is going to work, Thomas? Are you sure that they're not going to find out? And Thomas is like, yeah, it's fine, trust me. I've tested this machine. I mean, it's gonna play your voice. It's gonna sound perfect. No one's ever gonna be any the wiser. And then Molly's like, oh, all right, if you're sure. Go get him, Molly. So she goes out there and
Thomas is sipping on a water bottle and it falls onto the
yeah. God damn it. And he's like, oh shit. And it's like, it pours into the machine and just... and then like Molly's just like kind of lip syncing on stage with no music, and everybody's just like, what the hell? She's a liar. And, Thomas would have to run out there in front of her and just be like, okay, everybody, sorry, there's been a little bit of Molly has sore vocal cords. That's what happened here. But there's all this booing and no one hears him. That's the situation that we are in right now. When Thomas, creates this deceptive train situation.
So then that takes us to when, everything is revealed to be a lie. When the wind blows off the tarp.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's interesting. I kind of like to picture there's a lot more engines there. Because in the episode, it's just Gordon and Emily and Percy. I would like to imagine that there's a ton of them. Like, James and Henry are over at, like, the main event, and they witness this, and you've got, like, a lot of the mainline engines are here to kind of to see.
There's, like, Neville, or, like, even engines from, like, Arthur that come from the other side of the island just because they want to know what the heck this thing is.
Yeah, exactly, right? Where, some of these characters... I mean, are most of them, in fact, are seeing Molly for the first time. So the tarps fly off, and there's a different reaction from everybody, where Gordon's like, oh, I knew it couldn't be more important than the Express. And Percy's got his little disappointment, where he's just like, I was expecting a special. And then, and then we've got, Emily's just like, you see that? I was right about her, everyone. I was right. I'm better than her. I get the sense that Emily's just a little bit insecure, because this is the
little bit.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, when Molly shows up, you gotta realize, like, this is the only other... I don't think she's as old as Emily, but she is an older engine. She's got kind of this ornate look to her. She's very glamorous.
She's the era that pretty much replaced the Sterling singles, or at least was exemplified of that.
That's true. And also, like, I kind of look at it like, there's a few kind of hallmark amazing kind of classes of locomotive that are just like kind of they're almost like wealthy families of Britain, if you can imagine it. So yeah. Like, the Claude Hamiltons and the Sterlings and the Gresleys, these are high-end names. And Molly comes...
What about the Ivets?
No one cares. And so these are all like, really high class engines. And it's interesting because I feel like Molly would be among these kind of higher class circles where she actually would have come from a quite, the equivalent of a wealthy locomotive family, a family that is, that is very highly respected. And so, and they're rivals of the Sterlings. So Emily immediately sees this engine and thinks, oh, these are the ridiculous engines designed by Mr. Sterling's competitor. All right then. Well, I suppose I'll throw some trash at her. How about that?
Where's Whiff?
Come with me. Jinx, you owe me a soda. God damn it. Wouldn't that be amazing if Emily just uses Whiff to mudsling against her enemies? Like, that's just... And he's kind of like, well, I don't totally agree with this, but, oh, it's Emily, what can I do? And he, so he, like...
And it's Whiff. Whiff, who has been dying to have a conversation with Emily since he met her.
Yeah, right. So he's kind of like... He would go up to Molly and just be like, look, Molly, I'm really sorry about this. We could talk about this later. Have a 3-hour therapy session. But Emily's kind of on the other side of the yard, can't hear him. And she's like, get on with it, Whiff. Throw the trash.
Whiff is like a catapult on a flatbed.
Yeah. And it just launches it and like a huge ball of trash explodes in Molly's face. She's just like, oh... And Whiff is like, I don't think he would, though. I feel like he would change his mind at the very last minute. He's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't hurl this trash. And Emily she's just like, damn it, Whiff. Oh, I'll have to find another engine to hurl that trash. Give me back the trash. Like, she brought her own trash. We're making Emily out to be really cruel, which... I think she could be if she was this threatened. And I feel like she is threatened by Molly. I feel like they're around the same size, except that Molly is I mean, like, what's one of the biggest things that Emily prides herself on is her big wheels.
Right.
Molly's are kind of contenders for that. I mean, I don't know what the exact diameter is, but, she's got pretty huge wheels, and she's got 2 axles.
And she's painted this bright yellow. She's
Yeah.
painted this, like, regal looking, I would call it very turn of the century, sort of 19th into the 20th century look.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's true. It's very, you know what it
yeah.
really looks like? It really looks like Stradley's color. His kind
Yeah,
of
it does.
improved engine green that's really yellow. Honestly, I wonder if that factors in at all to why Thomas immediately takes a liking to Molly, is because she reminds him of, like, engines from his, like, really, really early youth. Because, like,
That
he's
would
probably...
be sweet.
Yeah, it would be. Because, I mean, she's kind of painted like them. And I feel like Thomas, on some level, he was like... The LBSC is a railway that's often forgotten. Nobody thinks about the E2s. The Terriers make somewhat of an impact, but that's just because Stepney lives for like 60 years and everybody's like, how did he do it? But, he hasn't really made that impact yet. So, like, I feel like Thomas on some level is driven by wanting to kind of immortalize his railway. I could argue that might be a perspective on his past. And I think that, seeing an engine actively choose one of Stradley's liveries. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but the idea that somebody else would appreciate a bright, garish yellow with those, kind of that green line work and stuff, I feel like it would make him happy to see. He'd be like, everybody told Stepney that his color was stupid, and look at this. Somebody actually appreciates it.
Contrasted with Emily's dark green, which kind of says something, because I also think that Emily would get the totally wrong impression of Molly, because she's not having an honest conversation with her.
Yeah.
She would look at Molly and be like, she's trying to one-up me.
Yeah, exactly. But if she talked to her for a second, she'd just realize, like, Molly would be like, well, I chose this color because it was nice and cheerful and it makes me happy to look at. It's it's like a sunny day. I can't stand cloudy days or rain or anything like that. But a bright yellow that puts a little bit of a smile on my face. And Emily would hear that and be like, oh, well, now I feel like a bad person. But she doesn't sit and listen to all that. Molly would be like, hold on, I can explain. No, let me explain to you. I was the queen of the GNR. I was their express engine. Do you know what that means? And Molly would just be like, look, please, just let me get a word in edgewise. No, I have more to say, And she'd keep cutting her off, right? And then she'd kind of rumble off in a huff of, well then, if you think you're so much better than me, I will have to prove you wrong. And she leaves, right? And then Molly would just be there like, oh, I feel like I could have done better in that conversation. But it's very interesting. I think it's very interesting that this whole episode, even though it's not focused on Emily,
she looms over it.
Yeah, she does. Because, like, it's kind of between Thomas and Emily, because Emily caused Molly's kind of discontent and her sadness in this episode. I'm sure in general, she's just a sad engine in general, got insecurity, and so it's not like Emily caused it in totality. But this specific day, she kicked it off. She ruined Molly's first day on Sodor. And so Thomas then comes along as a notorious kind of rival to Emily. And, he goes and actually, comforts her and gives her, moral support. Kind of does the opposite of what she did. Which is fascinating because Thomas and Emily are always at odds with each other. They've always got this kind of rivalry. Because Emily is it makes a lot of sense why, too, because Emily is she's very queenly, she believes in ruling over people, she has a good heart, and oftentimes, when she does kind of give people orders or suggestions, they're actually kind of good suggestions, but the thing is, she very much believes in governing people. Whereas Thomas is the exact opposite.
Thomas leads the rebellion.
Yeah, no, exactly, right? He's very daring. He believes little engines can do big things. He believes in the power of the individual. And that's kind of, what he does with Molly here is he finds he meets an engine just randomly for the first time that he's never met before. And he immediately says, look, we can prove to everybody that you're valuable. And we'll do it the way that I do. by choosing a really impressive color and having a number 1 on your side. Except your version will be a tarp and some lanterns. But that's basically it, right? Like, his thinking is like, yeah, anybody can make anything of themselves. However, you do have to make something and put it over what you are already.
And I do think that over time, Emily's relationship with Molly would improve because...
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, I feel like... After wouldn't it be amazing if, like, here's another rewrite of, like, the episode is, what if instead of Molly running off and then Thomas gets her alone and goes and takes her to the coaling plant, instead the ending of the episode is Molly runs off and Thomas cannot find her. He doesn't know where she is. He's just like, oh god, where's Molly? I hope she's okay. And then he's running around the island, and then finally he approaches a junction, and he realizes Molly's down this branch, and he approaches it and he's like, she's probably down here, and then he runs into Emily, and the two bump, and just in time stop, and Thomas is like, oh, what are you doing here? What do you think? I'm going after Molly. And Thomas is like, you're going after Molly? Hold on, I thought you had no respect for her. I thought you... Yes, well, I didn't realize she was going to cry. I didn't know. Yeah.
Well, now that she made me feel bad, of course I have to find her.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, the fact that she actually changes her mind and decides to go after her, even though it's only because she's been made to feel guilty, but still, she's like, of course I've got to go and make sure she's all right. I didn't realize she was so unstable. She might have thrown herself off an old bridge or something. You don't think she would do that, do you? I don't know. I've known her for a day, Thomas. And you have too, by the way. I don't think that you should have gone and made this big show of things. She's clearly not the type of engine that appreciates that. And Thomas is like, look, I don't like being lectured by you, but... You're kind of right, just a little bit. Ha! See? This is not the time to brag, Emily. Molly could be down in a ditch somewhere. Let's go. And so they couple up together, right? And they kind of search down the line for her. And eventually they finally find her kind of crying on a siding. And, Molly's just like, no, go away. And, but Emily's like, hold on, let me speak. Molly, I'm sorry about what I said this morning. I didn't realize you were going to take it so hard. Look, the truth is... When I first saw you, I was... deeply insecure. No, I'm not. I'm looking for a better synonym for that.
Harsh?
No, not that either. Just don't interrupt me anymore. I was... you were posh. Just admit it. Just accept it. Like, there's no, like, she's trying to make it look good, but there's no way to spin it. So
yeah. It's like, fine. I won't be political about it. I was threatened by you.
Yeah. And she kind of, like, she makes that clear. She's like, to be honest with you, I think that livery is quite glamorous, and I think that I just worry, you're a mid-sized engine like me, you've got some grandeur to you. I was worried you'd try to take my job. And Molly's just like, your job? Oh no, I don't like pulling passengers. What? No, I don't. I prefer goods. And it's like a genuine thing. Like, she legitimately prefers it. Like, she's not, and that's something that they, like, Emily never even considered, is like that an engine would not want passengers. And Emily's like, oh, okay, I feel better now. Never mind. And so
go back to work, commoner.
She just backs out of the branch, and leaves. But Thomas is still there with Molly, and the two of them have a heart to heart. And Thomas is just like, I'm sorry that I put you on the spot like that. Maybe I shouldn't have launched an all-out advertising campaign across the entire island to put all eyes on you. Maybe that wasn't exactly good for your mental health. Well, yeah, not really, but I appreciate the idea. Yeah, well, glad I could help, kinda, until it all got messed up. Here, let's go back to the yard. I'm sure that everybody will change their minds about you once they actually hear your story, And so they, and they do, right? And things slowly get better. But yeah, one thing I want to talk about is, I feel like I've always felt this way, and I know you feel this way too, is I feel like Molly, like, the engines that are introduced in the same seasons together kind of, like, flock together in a way.
I'm going to put a name to it. I'm going to call it merchandise syndrome, because
yeah.
I did the same thing with Wilbert and Frank as a child. I thought they worked on the same railway just because Wooden Railway released them in 2001 together in the same batch.
Right,
so,
yeah. Because that's the thing. All storytelling is just based on connections, based on two things that feel like they both matter in the same way. They're both, connected. And the thing is, even when it's not, even when there's no like in-universe foundation for it, when you are introduced to two characters at exactly the same time, you can't help but have a kind of spirit bond between them forever. And, I feel that way about Molly and Neville, because they were introduced in the same season. They just both feel that Neville's kind of shy in his own way. He's kind of got this sort of, he isn't. He jumps into situations, but I feel like it's very interesting how Neville introduces himself, where he's just like, hello everybody, like
Neville is a very awkward bull in a china shop when it comes to propriety, right? When it comes to expectations and social norms.
Yeah, and I think he's got a bit of shyness because of that. And what we're seeing is him kind of very, very violently overcoming that shyness because he knows he won't otherwise, so he doesn't know how to go, hello there, I'm Neville, how you doing? So instead he's either going to sit there in silence for an hour and be like, oh, what do I say? Or he's just going to go, hello, hey, so that's kind of like, I feel like he's in that position,
Yeah.
So I imagine, I could see it to be where Molly, as she's settling in on the island and things are starting to get better for her.
Well, and she would associate with other goods engines too. So
yeah, that's true, right? And it's like, I imagine before she came to Sodor, she was painted all black. She was, and for most of her life, even back on the
GER.
The GER, when she was like, she could have been in blue. I don't think she was in blue then either. Like, I think when Emily meets Molly, she's picturing her in this stunning dark blue that the railway had, that she's always kind of envied. But now Molly, but Molly in fact never wanted that blue. She always went with black so that she could kind of blend into the background. So it's like, I totally see that being the case. And I think she'd kind of flock to Neville as a result, because she would know, as a rule, engines that are painted black, when they don't have to be, are more shy. And the thing is, she notices that about Neville, and she kind of, approaches him, and, she's kind of like, or she probably wouldn't approach him, but she wouldn't avoid him. And whereas Neville would approach her, Molly would just kind of be at the water tower one day, just kind of calmly simmering, away from all the other engines, kind of in the corner of the yard, right? Where she gets along well with everybody, but she also very much keeps to herself. If she were a human, she'd be like a bookworm. She'd kind of be like sitting there kind of just reading books all the time, not really looking up from them. And, so Neville kind of would go over there and interrupt her from the water tower and be like, hello there.
Almost startle her.
Yeah, she'd be like, hello. You're Neville, right? And he'd just be like, yep, that's my name. I saw your special the other day. Oh God, don't bring that up, please. I don't want to talk about it. No. It looked pretty great, until the tops blew off. That wasn't great. But if I were in your position, I don't know. I'd just be happy that I tried to do a good job. Like, you just try to kind of uplift her, right? And Molly would just be like, well, thank you, I suppose. And they kind of just start to hit it off. Where like, Neville would bring up, back on the, I guess they call it the other railway here, don't they? Back on the other railway. They used to call me the ugly duckling. The name kind of stuck. And Molly just kind of perks up. She's like, my sisters on the GER, they used to make fun of me a lot too. Oh, did they now? Yeah, they did. They said that I was the shiest steamer of the bunch. They said that my brass work was sooty. Like, stuff like that, right? Where she kind of starts to open up a little bit, because she has not encountered a single engine on this island yet that has any self-worth issues. Like, right. Emily is, has a lot of confidence. So does Thomas. So does everybody, right?
What I like about the two of them is they're a yin-yang. So
yeah.
Molly is someone who is really beautiful on the outside, but has an inner turmoil.
Yeah,
Neville
exactly.
is someone who, he does have anxiety, but he is self-assured in his presentation.
Yeah, he has like overcome, because the thing is, he's like, it's kind of like Neville and Neil would get along great.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah, because the thing is, Neville's like, he's ugly but kind, and he's ugly but he's proud. He doesn't have like a problem with it. He'd be the first to say, "Oh yeah, I'm hideous. I can tell that. I mean, look at me." But he'd make a joke about it, right? And he'd say, "Yeah, I'm pretty ugly, but I did win the war," and and
yeah, that's the biggest flex, really.
yeah. And then Gordon, like if Gordon was making fun of him, he'd immediately stop and be like, "Never mind, thank you for your service," and and that would be it, But that's the thing, right? Neville is ugly on the outside, but self-assured about it on the inside. So he's kind of right about the way he looks, but he is okay with it. Yeah. Whereas Molly is wrong about the way she looks and hates the way she looks. So it is a perfect yin yang. You're right. Also, the color clash is very interesting. It's like black versus yellow. It's a good clash. So I could see the two of them really hitting it off. Another character that I could see, like, Molly.
Are we about to talk about my boy?
I'll let you lead into that one.
All right. And as you were saying, one of the other characters that I associated with Molly is Murdoch, and it just the dynamic of all the side characters, the goods engines that kind of just look on as like the Steam team are like beating each other up in the parking lot. I love that vibe.
There's all these reasonable goods engines that are just kind of behind the scenes, because it's like Gordon, Henry, and James are constantly vying for the Express, right? And then like the other engines are just kind of looking on, just kind of like, you've got Murdoch and Neville and Molly just standing there kind of watching it, just like well, they're making fools of themselves, and that's it, right? I think Murdoch, really fits into that kind of group of characters, because he too is very shy. He's, at the beginning of the episode, I said Molly's really the only character we have in that archetype, and she's certainly the only sad variety of that shy archetype. However, I think that Murdoch definitely has a lot of shyness.
Murdoch is someone who embraces his shyness.
Exactly, yeah. He's just much less apologetic about it. But he is quite shy. It would be very rare that Murdoch actually approaches somebody for a friendship and starts it himself. But I feel like one of the few times he did it was probably with Molly, because he could immediately see some of himself in her and kind of respect her.
Yeah.
And it's like,
he would also really respect a passenger engine who has a lot of street cred, a lot going for her, choosing to take the goods route, choosing a life that isn't glamorous.
Immediately it's a compliment to engines like him who were built for goods, because he'd be like because people like Gordon would have you believe that nobody ever chooses to pull goods, and that's only like something that you get stuck with. And people like Molly are kind of turning the scales on that and saying, no, I like goods. I like pulling them. I mean, that's my preference. And the thing is, it might not be necessarily for good reasons. I mean, I could see Molly liking goods trains just because she doesn't think she's deserving of passengers. Mm-hmm. But even if we get years on where she's been on Sodor for a long time and she's kind of starting to slowly cope with her anxieties and with her self-loathing, I think she's still going to prefer goods just because that's what she's done all her life. So even though now she's not pulling it for bad reasons, she's still doing it because it's just what she's used to. Like, she never developed a taste for passengers. Unfortunately, that's because everybody said, you're no good for it. Or, I imagine, there were definitely some cruel engines back on her old railway that kind of embedded that in her head. My mind goes to, like, the rest of the class. Like, maybe they kind of ate each other alive. Like, she was kind of the shyest steamer of them. And so they kind of bullied her for it. That's kind of what I picture.
Well, back in those days, they're continually vying for the affirmations of the railway boards and all that stuff, and to compete with the other railways. So it's like they can't show any weak links that they have.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, things were a lot tougher in those days. And so, I could totally see Molly being the victim of that, where she's just she's the runt of the litter. And so I think that would definitely, impact her,
And I do think that Murdoch seeing Molly for the first time would almost get a false impression, because he would see her with, this train, just completely living a lie. Granted, it's Thomas's lie, but it would,
Yeah.
I think it would be like, oh God, like the passenger engine from the mainland is coming and is trying to make trucks look glamorous, but he would understand almost immediately it's not her doing. She's not. She is a genuine person. She's just.
Yeah. He would once he sees Thomas, like he would go to the whole event, and the train's about to be revealed, and he's just like, who is this engine? Why is it that she's doing this? And then he doesn't realize Thomas arranged it, and Thomas pulls out from behind the train and says, "Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Molly's event." and then Murdoch's like, "Oh, that explains it.
Yeah.
Oh, this poor girl. Hold on a minute." And then once she's devastated and runs off, Murdoch's like, "Probably not my place to go after her, but at the same time, I will make a mental note." And then the next day, right, he reaches out to her and makes her feel better about it and says, "I do respect a passenger engine that would pull goods. I mean, to be honest, the Fat Controller will give you whatever you want on this island. So the fact that you chose what you did says a lot about you." And, Molly would just be like, "Really? Well, thank you." And they would kind of start to hit it off. I think engines like Gordon and James would start to get nervous. It's like,
"Oh, all the socially awkward ones are forming a club. And it seems to be more morally virtuous than our own. Oh, we've got to step it up."
Like, imagine that, the Molly, Neville, and Murdoch, the quiet engines trio versus the big engines trio.
Emily says, "Should I get my catapult?"
God damn it. Her cat, like, she's stolen it from Whiff at this point. She's not giving it back. Like, oh my God. God. Jesus Christ.
One thing I will say is, I think she would have a great relationship with the trucks. I just get that impression.
Secondly, especially because she's, constantly like, she likes pulling goods trains. And also, I think she is, and I think she has to be deeply empathetic. Like, I think she really has
extremely.
to be able, she's very kind-hearted. She very much cares about others. We've talked a lot about her, like, being taken care of by other engines. But I think that once she's in a place where she doesn't feel bad about herself, as much as she did anyway, and she's kind of more stable, I feel like she would just be, like, a really supportive, kind-hearted character. That could really just, like, she would totally understand any struggle that any character has. She'd be the type of character that can go up to Cranky and get him in tears because he's talking about his
childhood and, oh God, and back when I was being built in the dockyard and they said I wouldn't amount to anything, and, well, look at me now! Look at me now!
Like, I imagine she'd literally be able to, like, reduce anybody to tears in a good way.
Which is really sweet because she, for someone who does not have a lot of confidence, she sure does, I think, raise other people up.
Yeah.
And that feeds into my second thing that I was going to say is that, in her personality bio, it says that she is looked upon as a big sister by some of the other engines. I do really love, this is something that I kind of got out of this episode that I hadn't really thought about.
Yeah.
Was Molly being a passenger engine that prefers goods. I do think that a lot of the little engines, a lot of the tank engines
would look
at
that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, usually when, goods engines, it's like Gordon talks down on all of them. All the big engines, you're supposed to look up to Gordon, somebody who pulls the express, even though you can never be him because he won't let you. But Molly would be like this really big, impressive, kind of this engine that, like, you could see thunder by with a goods train and think, wow, okay, well, actually, that's, and she'd talk to you. She'd stop and have a conversation. She'd be like,
right.
How are you doing today, Percy? How are your spirits? And Percy would just be like, oh, I'm doing good. Thanks, Molly. Yeah, you look great with that goods train thundering by. And, it would be sweet because, he doesn't usually see engines that, like, are proud to pull goods.
And it's not, it's not like engines like Murdoch aren't, really nice to the tank engines. I think that Murdoch is almost too big for the tank engines to feel like they can relate to him.
That's true.
Molly is the perfect medium.
Also, I think it's the fact that, like, Murdoch, on some level, he's content with goods trains, but it's not like he has any sort of passion for them. Whereas I feel like, Molly really, that is where she is most comfortable. And, I think it would send a really good message to everybody, which, again, is very interesting because it would threaten Gordon's sort of hierarchy that he's constructed, and which would put her at odds with him, which would just be this vicious cycle because, like, if there's any engine that shouldn't be at odds with anybody, it's Molly. I mean, she's not going to handle that well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think she will never put somebody else down, no matter what she does.
It's almost similar to our Arthur episode where we mentioned that Arthur wants to be a smaller tank engine than he is.
Yeah.
I think Molly wants to distance from the glitz and glamour life, from the life and expectations of big engines.
But it's just that instead of wanting to do it because she likes the alternative, she's kind of doing it because she doesn't think she deserves it. Which
she's self-defeating.
Yeah, which is tragic, but at the same time is very interesting. And I think I just think she has very strong morality and cares, a lot about everybody. And so I think even if the three big engines ganged up on her and, like I imagine a scene in the sheds where like, they're all picking on Edward and then, Gordon's like,
let's try and bring her into the fold. Molly, isn't Edward a ridiculous old,
and
doesn't Edward suck?
And Edward would just gesture his eyes to her like, don't say anything. But Molly would be like, no, he's not. And, she wouldn't say it with confidence. She'd say it with like, oh God, I'm about to be attacked, right? And then Gordon would be like,
I beg your pardon?
You're being mean, stop. And then the James would be like, oh, so this is how you're approaching the three most important engines on the railway. Well then.
Yes, I quite agree. Well then, maybe we'll say a few things about you, like your garish color and that ridiculous brass work.
Oh, and then I imagine Edward chimes up and says, stop making fun of her. But then also at the same time, Henry chimes in simultaneously and says, stop! And then James and Gordon both stop and freeze, and they're like,
what, Henry?
And Henry's just like, don't. She doesn't deserve it. And, and he actually helps to kind of turn the scales, and he's like, no one ever stands up to those two. I appreciate it. I've been trying to for the last 70 years, but I'm not very good at it. And Molly's just like, well, thanks for standing up for me, I feel like every situation she goes into, she would make better, And, at detriment to herself, but I think over time, everybody on the island, even Gordon, would learn to treat her with sensitivity because she's just too nice to be mean to. The thing is, even Edward will throw snark back at you. Gordon can justify getting mad at Edward when Edward will make jokes at his expense, But the thing is, Molly is just so nice. She's so
and
sweet.
I love what you just said about the scene that just took place, because other engines with confidence issues could have just gone with Gordon and James and said something about Edward.
And Molly won't do that.
It speaks to her strengths that, even with her self-defeating nature, with her insecurity, she will still speak up for those she cares about.
Yeah, and in a way, I think the last character I want to draw parallels to is Edward. Because I really think that Molly, I think Edward has a lot of insecurity himself. Edward is in a very similar position, honestly, where he does everything that he can for the people around him. He spends all of his time helping other engines, giving them advice, helping them out of, helping them with mistakes that they've made, helping them out of difficult positions. That is Edward's whole life. He is the one that everybody on the island leans on. And the thing is, I feel like, that's at detriment to himself. He kind of accepts, like, well, I'm not going to be happy with this, but you know what? It's important that I look out for my friends. And so he does that, and so he takes the punches from Gordon, where Gordon has had a bad day and he's just being rude. Edward's not going to start up the fight in the sheds. Instead, he's just going to be like, right, Gordon, very well, Gordon, as Gordon kind of, tears him to shreds, right? And he should stand up for himself, but he doesn't, right? Because he knows that will cause a fight. Now, if he hurts somebody else's feelings, like Molly, for instance, Edward will stand up against him. But when he himself is being attacked, he's just going to let it happen because it's all right if I get attacked. I mean, that's different. I can make that choice, but I can't make it for anyone else. You know, but the thing is, I feel like Molly's in the exact same position as him, where the one person she tears down is herself, but everybody else she would never dare. And I think she could relate to him on that, except I think Molly is a little bit more honest about it. I think that she actually will, you know, admit, like, I know that I shouldn't beat up on myself so much, but I do. Whereas Edward would be like, I didn't beat up on myself. No, I'm... Yes, you do, Edward. I mean, you constantly say you're too old to pull important trains, and feel like the driver won't choose you, and it just seems to me like you're beating down on yourself.
Oh, those are just statements of fact, Molly. I know where I stand.
No, they're not statements of fact, Edward. They're lies. Lies about yourself. You're a wonderful engine, and you have a lot to offer. I mean, you're amazing.
Well, I don't know what to say about that, Molly. It's not every day that someone says that to me.
Well, they should say it more often. You deserve it. You know, I honestly think that, like, that would, like, Molly could change the way Edward thinks.
I think like Edward would cry in that scene.
He would, yeah. She could even get him to cry. And he'd do it in the middle of a sentence, too. He'd be like, well, you know, I do really appreciate the... Oh, God, I haven't cried in 70 years. What is this? Like, you know, he's not... You know, he's just... He's so gentlemanly. And he's so, like... He's the strong one for everybody in their situations.
He's the sponge for everyone's problems.
Right,
he's the one
but he never gets to let it out, right? You know? Even with, like, say, Boko, I imagine would be, like, a huge, you know, engine that he leans on. Is, like... I think that
Boko has a stiff upper lip that
that
kind of doesn't allow for that degree of vulnerability.
Yeah, it's true. And the thing is, that's what Edward needs to keep going. Like, Boko is vital because, you know, he needs somebody who can... When Edward's starting to feel down for the Count and he's like, it's hopeless, I can't do this. Boko's like, yes, you can. No, dust yourself off and get back up. You know, it's like, it's, you know, that's what Edward needs, and that's why he's surrounded himself with an engine like that. However, Molly gives Edward something that he's never had before, which is that vulnerability. Somebody who actually understands his psychology. And Edward keeps his psychology, the way that his head works, he keeps it under lock and key. Nobody knows for sure how Edward actually thinks and how much self-loathing he really has. He doesn't let them know, because then they might try to help him, and then that will be a burden on them. So he doesn't let them know. But Molly, right. he has no choice with Molly because she recognizes it. She sees the signs because she's that way too. And that would be amazing, you know, for her to actually, you know, to kind of get through to Edward. Even engines that have known Edward since the beginning, like Thomas, wouldn't know that. Henry wouldn't know that. You know, they have an inkling, but Edward's never let them get that far because he's one step ahead of them and he can stop them from, you know, from really getting into the vault that is his subconscious. But Molly could. Molly would be an amazing therapist. She really would. And after she arrives, there's finally, like, Edward has a co-therapist on the island, another engine that can kind of help with that. You know, so that's great.
And I think that this episode has really broadened my love for Molly because I've thought about Molly for years and years, and I've really enjoyed the character. But I think that having a kind of a writer's room session, by giving her a character gallery, really helps.
Yeah, because it puts everything in context. But there's a million great situations that you could put Molly into. Either her being just kind of the just exaggerated, sad, kind of down on herself character, or being this, like, character that can get through to everybody and actually make them happy because she has such immense empathy. You know, so I mean, it's like either way, you know, I think that she's just got an immense amount of potential. She's one of the most emotionally raw characters in the entire Thomas mythos. And so, you know, I think that she's got just so much potential. You could write a million stories about her. And I absolutely adore her. She's very high on my list. Anyway, so I think then, you know, that's pretty much all we have to say. So without further ado, I've been Master of the Lemons, a.k.a. Lemmy.
And I'm here at the Japanese Train, a.k.a. Matt.
Take care.
We'll see you in the next one.